Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Melody Joy, and this is Melody Joy Quilts. I have just finished making 30 blocks for my Brightly quilt. It is 15 chain blocks and 15 star blocks. And next, before I can start putting my rows together, I am going to spend a few minutes squaring up my blocks. Now, the pattern says the blocks should finish to 12.5 inches. But when I was looking at my blocks, some of them finished to 12.25, some of them finished to 12.125, and so I am actually going to trim all of my blocks to 12 inches square just to make sure that they are all consistent and centered before I put my rows together. So the method that I use to square up my blocks is I'm in the center of my cutting mat, and I'm making sure that these center seams of my 9 patch are on the 16 and 20 inches, and the edges of my block are just slightly overlapping on the 12 and 24 inch lines. I'm going to trim off the sides. I'm going to turn my block around. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to double check that the center of my block is on inches 16 and 20, and that the side of my block here is on size 12, inch 12, and I'm going to trim along the 24 inch line. Again, this is just where I'm working on the center of my mat. There is a dark gray square in the center of my mat that is a 12 by 12, and so I just line it up with that. That's where I'm working from. I'm sure there's other methods of squaring it up. This is just what I've been doing. Also, the center of your blocks, there is a seam. Because I have a 6-inch ruler, if I lay the edge of my ruler on those center seams, then I'm gonna get a 12-inch block. When I'm done squaring it up, I'm just going to move it over that 12-inch dark square in the center, and you can see my block is now pretty much a perfect 12-inch square. So you may be wondering, why do I even need to square these up? But you see when you finish how this is very uneven right here? And if you tried to put this next to another block, it's not really going to go super well because you have all this unevenness. So trimming it up is going to help tremendously. So now that you've taken the time to square up all your blocks, you're ready to sew your quilt blocks into rows. This is the very fun part of making a quilt because you're finally going to get to see all that effort pay off. See that big smile on my face? I'm finally getting to start to see how this is going to work. I'm going to line this up. I'm going to check and make sure that any directional fabric is going the right way. There is an owl on that star block, so I'm making sure it's going the right way. Then I'm going to fold these pretty side to pretty side, right sides together. I'm going to line up my corners. I'm not going to pin or clip right now because I'm only working with just 2 quilt blocks, so I feel pretty confident that I can hold this together. But you'll see when I get to longer rows, I'm going to use a lot of clips. But for right now, with just 2 blocks, I feel confident that I can just manage it through the machine. Okay, it's now time to iron the seam that you just made. I'm going to press it first to set the seam. For all these blocks, I'm going to be ironing the seam allowance on the back towards the chain blocks. If I do this on every row, then when I go to put my rows together, it will nest really nicely. I am making the throw size version of this Brightly quilt, so each row is going to have 5 blocks. And I'm checking here, I have chain, star, chain. It's going to then be a star and then a chain. I'm double checking that I'm not putting the wrong blocks together, and I have a chain block next to a star block, and that all my directional fabric is correct. Now, because I'm working with larger pieces of fabric, I am adding some clips. So I'm double checking my intersections. I'm clipping at the end to make sure that that's going to line up right. And now I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam down the side, back stitching a little when I start and when I stop. Once I finish this seam, I will be taking it back over to the ironing board and ironing it again towards the chain block. Staying consistent with which way you press your seam allowances is really going to help with the nesting of the rows. I know I've already said that, but it bears repeating because it will just add to a neater project. There we go. That's 1 row of this quilt done. So I went ahead and made another row that is the reverse. It goes star, chain, star, chain, star, and all the seam allowances, I'm showing you here, all my seam allowances are going towards the chain block. I'm going to fold that together. right sides together, pretty sides together. Now I'm going to go to the intersection of each block, and my seam allowances should be going in opposite directions if I have ironed this correctly. I'm going to just double check. I'm going to feel with my fingers and make sure that that seam is nesting, and I'm going to clip it. Then I'm going to come to the end, make sure that my corners are lining up, and I'm going to clip. Because this is such a long piece of fabric, it is approximately 5 feet long, and I've got multiple layers going here. I'm going to be adding a bunch of clips because I want this quilt to turn out beautiful, and I want everything to line up the way it should go. I'm just going to continue on down this whole row, clipping at the intersection of each block, and because each quilt block is a 9 patch, I'm going to clip at the intersection of each of those. I wanted to show you a different angle. So again, every time I'm going to be feeling for the intersection of the blocks. The seams should be going in opposite directions. I'm going to feel that with my fingers and just really try to nest it up as close as possible to each other and put a clip on each intersection. This is just going to help ensure that the lines are where I want them when I sew this whole row together. You can use pins, but I hate being stabbed with needles, which my mom thinks is hilarious because I'm an infusion nurse and my job is literally putting needles in people all day long, my real job, but I don't like being stuck, so I use clips. You're now gonna go ahead and start sewing down your long row. Just take your time. You can stop and adjust if you need to make sure that it's going where you want it to go. Don't pull against your feed dogs, just guide the fabric, but don't pull against your machine. So my machine actually has a 1/4 inch groove, and if I keep the edge of my fabric in line with that 1/4 inch groove and the edge of my 1/4 inch foot along the side of the fabric, those are 2 places that I can check. If I'm being consistent with that, then I should be getting a consistent 1/4 inch seam. So now all we have to do is iron this. I'm going to set the seam, then I'm going to open it up. I'm going to press the seam allowance down towards me. I just feel like it's easier to iron the rows that way because when I open it up, it kind of already is that way. I'm just making sure with my fingers it's going the correct way before I apply the heat. And I'm just going to smooth this all out and make sure it's as flat as possible. And then I'm gonna just admire it, and I've got 2 rows of this Brightly quilt done. This quilt ends up being in the throw size 6 rows long, so 5 blocks across and 6 blocks down. When I've made it before, what I have done is made 3 rows and a set of 3 rows and then put those 2 sets together. Happy quilting!